There is a moment, often lasting less than a second, when you realize a financial decision was wrong. The investment that did not pay off. The purchase that was not worth it. The opportunity you did not take. In that moment, a specific neural conflict activates inside your brain. And what your brain does next is not designed to fix the mistake. It is designed to hide it from you. This is the mechanism behind one of the most studied phenomena in modern psychology, cognitive dissonance. First identified by the social psychologist Leon Festinger in the 1950s, it describes what happens when two beliefs, or a belief and an action, come into conflict. For most of the 20th century, dissonance was treated as a curiosity of social behavior. Why people justify their choices. Why cult members double down after prophecies fail. But over the last 2 decades, neuroimaging research has revealed something more unsettling. Cognitive dissonance is not a quirk of personality. It is a measurable event inside the brain, with its own neural signature, its own circuitry, and its own predictable response. In the next 15 minutes, we will examine how this mechanism shapes financial behavior. Why intelligent, informed people defend money decisions they privately know were mistakes. We will look at the neuroscience behind the defense, the studies that traced it to specific brain regions, and the reason most financial advice fails to address it. Because if you have ever wondered why reading another book about money does not seem to change what you actually do with money, the answer is unlikely to be discipline, or motivation, or knowledge. The answer is that your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do, and that response was never designed to make you wealthy. In 1959, Leon Festinger and his colleague James Carl Smith ran an experiment that, on the surface, seemed almost trivial. Participants were asked to perform an extraordinarily boring task, turning pegs on a board for an hour. Afterward, they were paid to tell the next participant that the task had actually been enjoyable. Some were paid a small amount. Others were paid significantly more. Conventional logic would predict that those paid more would later report enjoying the task more. They had been better rewarded for the lie. But the results were the opposite. The participants paid less were the ones who, when surveyed later, said they genuinely found the task interesting. Festinger's interpretation reshaped psychology. The participants paid more had an external justification. The money explained the lie. The participants paid less did not. Their minds were left with an unresolved conflict. I told someone this was enjoyable, but I do not believe it was enjoyable. To resolve that conflict, the brain did not change the action. It changed the belief. This is the essence of cognitive dissonance. When behavior and belief collide, the brain rewrites belief, because belief is cheaper to change than behavior is to undo. And it does this without your permission. You do not sit down and decide to revise your opinion of a bad decision. The revision happens beneath awareness, in milliseconds, before the discomfort of contradiction can fully form. By the time you have words for what you think, the rewriting is already complete. This is the first thing to understand. The brain is not protecting the truth. It is protecting the self-image of the person who chose. Now consider how this plays out with money. You buy a stock at $100 a share. It drops to $70. The rational response, given the new information, would be to evaluate the position fresh. Would you buy it today at $70? If the answer is no, the loss is not a reason to hold. It is a reason to sell. But this is rarely what happens. Instead, something else takes over. The investment becomes part of your story. Selling at a loss is no longer a financial decision. It is an admission. And the brain treats admission of a wrong choice the way it treats a physical threat. Imaging studies suggest that contemplating a loss activates regions associated with physical pain and social rejection, not the pure logic of profit and loss. So you hold. You read articles that confirm the company's long-term promise. You discount articles that do not. You begin to construct, sentence by sentence, a version of reality in which the original decision was correct, just early. This is dissonance reduction in action. And it is not a failure of intelligence. The most analytical investors are often the most vulnerable to it, because they have more sophisticated tools for constructing the justifying narrative. Watch yourself the next time you defend a financial position. Notice how natural the defense feels, how the words arrive before the reasoning. Notice that you are not arguing toward a conclusion. You are arguing from one, backwards, into evidence selected to fit it. In 2009, a team of researchers led by the neuroscientist Vincent van Veen used functional MRI to watch the brain in the act of resolving dissonance. Participants were placed in a scanner and asked to argue, falsely, that the experience of being inside the cramped, loud machine was pleasant. As they constructed these justifications, two regions lit up consistently: the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula. The anterior cingulate cortex is the brain's conflict detector. It activates whenever incoming information collides with existing belief. The anterior insula is associated with the feeling of unease, the visceral, almost nauseous sensation that something is wrong. Together, these two regions appear to do something remarkable. They do not simply register the conflict. They generate a discomfort intense enough that the rest of the brain rushes to make it stop. And the fastest way to make it stop is not to investigate the conflict, but to dissolve it. To construct a story in which the conflict never existed. What the imaging research seems to suggest is that the strength of dissonance reduction tracks the strength of this neural alarm. The more uncomfortable the contradiction, the more aggressive the rewriting. Which means that the most important financial mistakes, the ones with the largest emotional weight, are the ones least likely to be examined honestly. The brain, in effect, allocates the most distortion to the decisions that most need clear thinking. This is why losses are not learning experiences for most people. They become origin stories. The mistake is reframed, sometimes within hours, into a lesson, a betrayal, a market anomaly, or a temporary setback. Anything except what it actually was. A decision the person would not make today, with the information they have today. Most financial advice ignores this entirely. The dominant model of money education assumes that information changes behavior. That if you know about compound interest, you will save. If you know about index funds, you will invest sensibly. If you know about loss aversion, you will overcome it. But this model misunderstands what knowledge does in the presence of dissonance. New information does not erase a previous decision. It threatens the self-image attached to that decision. And the brain, presented with a threat, does not update. It defends. This is why financial literacy programs have shown surprisingly modest effects on real behavior. It is why people who can explain compound interest at a dinner party still carry credit card debt at high interest rates. The knowledge is intact. The neural circuit that would let the knowledge change behavior is not. There is a deeper irony here. The more financial books a person has read, the more invested their identity becomes in being a person who reads financial books. And so when their actual portfolio underperforms, the dissonance is not just about the money. It is about the identity. And the brain reduces it the same way it always does. By quietly editing the story until the underperformance becomes evidence of patience, or strategy, or contrarian insight. The conventional advice: discipline yourself. Follow the system. Stay the course. It is not wrong, exactly. It is incomplete. It treats behavior as the product of will, when in fact behavior is downstream of a much older mechanism, one that operates well below the level of will. So what does the research suggest instead? The same neuroscience that maps the problem also points to a narrow but real pathway around it. Researchers studying belief revision, including work by Jonas Kaplan and others, have found that dissonance reduction can be slowed, and occasionally bypassed, when certain conditions are present. The first is what the literature sometimes calls self-affirmation. When the broader self-image is reinforced before a contradicting fact is introduced, the brain has less reason to defend any single belief. In practical terms, a person who can name several things they have done well financially is, paradoxically, more able to admit a specific decision was poor. The ego, briefly secured, can release its grip on the local mistake. The second condition is delay. Dissonance reduction operates fastest in the moments immediately after a decision is challenged. Studies suggest that introducing a structured pause, even of hours, between encountering the conflicting information and forming a response can reduce the strength of the rewriting. The brain still wants to defend, but the defense is less automatic. The third, and perhaps the most useful, is what some researchers describe as decoupling identity from decision. When a person is able to evaluate a past financial choice as the choice of someone with less information, rather than as a reflection of who they fundamentally are, the dissonance signal weakens. The mistake stops being a wound to the self and becomes simply a data point about a previous version of the self. None of this is glamorous. None of it sounds like the breakthrough that financial influencers promise. But this is what the underlying science actually supports. Not a mindset shift. Not a manifestation. A specific, slow, and uncomfortable practice of allowing contradictions to remain unresolved long enough to be examined. The discomfort is not the obstacle. The discomfort is the data. And the willingness to sit inside it, without rushing to dissolve it, is the closest thing the research describes to a real edge. In practice, this looks unremarkable. A person notices, on a Tuesday afternoon, that they have been holding a position they would not buy today. Instead of constructing a thesis for why it might still recover, the dissonance-reducing reflex, they write down two questions. Would I purchase this asset, at this price, with my current information? And, what is the smallest piece of evidence that would change my mind? Then they wait. They do not act in the moment. They allow the discomfort to be present without resolving it. They do not look for confirming articles. They do not check the price. 24 hours later, they read what they wrote. Most of the time, the answers have not changed. Sometimes they have. The decision that emerges from this slower process is, on average, less driven by the protection of a previous self. This is not a system. It is a posture. It does not promise wealth. It does promise a kind of clarity that the dissonance mechanism, by design, prevents. The reason most people do not adopt practices like this is not that they are unaware of them. It is that the practices themselves feel bad. Sitting with a financial mistake, fully, without softening it, runs directly against what the brain is built to do. The path of least neurological resistance is, and will always be, to resolve the conflict by rewriting the past. The path of most resistance is to leave the conflict open long enough to learn from it. Wealth, where it is built deliberately rather than inherited or stumbled into, tends to follow the second path. Cognitive dissonance is not a flaw in the human mind. It is one of its core features. It exists because, for most of human history, social cohesion mattered more than factual accuracy, and a stable self-image mattered more than an updated one. But the financial environment of the modern world does not reward stability of belief. It rewards revision. It rewards the willingness to look at a position, including the position of who you have been, and to ask whether the information available today would still produce that position. The mechanism in your brain that prevents this is older than money. It is older than language. It is doing what it was built to do. Knowing that does not turn it off. But it does, occasionally, create a small gap between the impulse to defend and the act of defending. And that gap, however brief, is where everything that follows happens.
You just learned something most people never see. That the conflict you feel after a wrong financial choice is not weakness. It is your brain hiding the error from itself, on purpose. Let that settle. Notice your breath, the soft weight of your shoulders, the quiet space behind your ribs. Anchor this insight there. Not as a slogan. As a fact your nervous system now knows. Picture, for a moment, the version of you who notices the flinch before it becomes a story. Who sees the hidden move, names it, and chooses again. Calm. Specific. Awake. Your brain just learned something it cannot fully unlearn. Let the default mode network do its quiet work. When you are ready, return to the video. Watch the next part with this new lens already in place.